Hi, this is Sarah Brosh. So I want to talk about this death threat that the Yale police called and accused me of, and that was on November 10th. And I want to talk about what has happened since then. So, of course, after I begged the Yale police to complete their investigation, and of course they weren't doing that because I believe that this was a fake death threat created by Yale in no small part to retaliate against me, because I reached out to Harvard professor Danielle Allen, and because I reached out to her, I believe she backed out of Yale's Trust in Higher Education Committee Speaker Series talk, which this committee and this speaker series is complete and utter farce. It's a joke, and I will do more videos about that. But then Yale was just refusing to complete the investigation. Yale told me that they 100% knew that the death threat came from my IP address, and it was against the presidents, former President Peter Salovey and current President Maury McGuinness, and others, professors, student government, anyone that I deemed had participated in the BLM Living While Black Race hoax at Yale. And they also said that I said I was inspired by the Charlie Kirk assassination. Now, allegedly, I sent this death threat on the Office of Institutional Equity and Accessibility website, which is terribly convenient because Yale had just implemented a policy where anything that's deemed part of an investigation for the OIEA office cannot be released to the public. And if a student releases any of these materials, they can be punished under the Student Code of Misconduct. And so then what happened, of course, there was the Brown shooting in December, and this made it even more of an imperative that this investigation be completed and it be determined who sent this death threat. Of course, I didn't send it. I would never do anything that's stupid. And even if it was one of my deranged stalkers, they need to figure out who sent this death threat. Yale deemed it a credible death threat, so they deemed it necessary to call and harass me about it, even though they absolutely knew I didn't send it. So now someone sent a credible death threat according to Yale and according to Yale police, but this person is completely unaccounted for. And this is after the mass shooting at Brown University. And I've done other videos where I've talked about how anti-white racism is the reason why the mass shooting at Brown University happened. And this is because it was deemed racist by the woke DEI admins and presidents and professors and police departments and police chiefs, including Yale Police's Ronnell Higgins and then Anthony Campbell, who has now moved on to Harvard. I'll do more videos about that. But they all decided that it was racist for white students to want to be safe on campus. And it was racist to keep those students safe. And it was racist for white students not to let complete strangers follow them into campus buildings, follow them into dorms, and especially, of course, if these other persons, these strangers, happen to be people of color, happen to be Black people in particular. This is all racist. It's racist against Black people to have an effective police force. This is all racism. And this is why to check IDs for the police or for anyone to ask to see an ID, a student ID, or any kind of an ID that indicates that you're an affiliate of either Yale University or Brown University. So all of this is deemed racism. And so I was obviously terrified after the Brown shooting, the mass shooting at Brown University, and I called the FBI and I asked them to investigate the death threat that Yale police accused me of sending, and the FBI declined to investigate. The Yale police was refusing to investigate. So I ended up at the end of December, I ended up calling the Department of Education. Well, I didn't call them, I sent them an email to the Department of Education, and I asked them to open a Clery Act investigation into Yale. Now, Trump opened a Clery Act investigation at Brown University. Now, the Clery Act is about reporting of crimes and crime statistics to the Department of Education from schools on campus, and it's also about transparency. And it's named after a student, Jean Clery, who was murdered on campus. And so it requires schools to have certain procedures, particularly surrounding transparency to the on-campus community, especially students. So schools have to issue timely warnings, they have to issue emergency alerts, they have to report certain crimes to the Department of Education. So Yale failed to do these things over and over and over again during the witch hunt at Yale. And there's a whole slew of Clery Act violations surrounding this most recent accusation against me by the Yale police, that I sent this death threat, and that I claimed that I was inspired by the Charlie Kirk assassination. It's completely insane, but it's not even more insane than anything else Yale has done to me. Yale accused me in 2019 of a plot to bomb the 2019 commencement ceremony. Yale swatted me more than 35 times when I was living in Las Vegas over 6 years. And Yale has repeatedly accused me of trying to lynch Black students at Yale because I called the non-emergency helpline of the Yale campus police exactly as the admin and the police told me to do for any reason whatsoever. And I did it because I was being harassed and stalked in my isolated Yale dorm room. So all of these are all like just a slew of Clery Act violations. So at the end of December, I emailed the Department of Education, and I said, you need to open an investigation at Yale for their Clery Act violations stemming from this, what I believe to be a fake death threat that Yale accused me of, and going all the way back, spanning years throughout the witch hunt at Yale. Now, all I got from the Department of Education was this boilerplate response that said, thank you so much for sending us this complaint. Now, and I have not heard anything back from the Department of Education since then, but a couple days later, the Yale police contacted me again, and they said that they wanted it in a phone call. And this lieutenant said that he wanted to talk to me, a different person than I had spoken with before. And he said that he wanted me to call him on his cell. So I demanded that they only interact with me in writing. And I said that I actually prefer that you just speak with the Department of Education, because I asked them to open a Clery Act investigation at Yale. And now, I believe, still have not heard from the Department of Education. I believe that the Department of Education prompted Yale to respond to me, because they had not done anything for 2 months about investigating this death threat. And then all of a sudden now, they're at the beginning of January-ish, they decide that they're gonna investigate this death threat. I believe that they were prompted by the Department of Education. But then, of course, when they send an email back to me, oh, now Yale has no way of figuring out the IP address of the person who sent this death threat. Even though Yale told me back in November that they 100% knew that I had sent this death threat, that it came from my IP address. Now Yale has no way of figuring out who sent this death threat. Isn't that interesting? Because the OIEA website, the form that I allegedly used to send this death threat, it anonymizes IP addresses. Now, here's the thing. I believe that Yale always knew this. The Yale police always knew this. Not only did they implement a policy where you can't release any materials that are construed as part of an investigation of the Office of Institutional Equity and Accessibility, but I believe that Yale always knew that the OIEA website anonymizes IP addresses. They didn't need to conduct an investigation to figure it out. And so they sent me this email pretending like, oh, they did all of this hardcore investigative work to figure out that the OIEA office, the website, anonymizes IP addresses. It didn't take them 2 months to figure out that the OIEA office anonymizes IP addresses. Even if they did do this, at the beginning of January-ish. So this is all just a complete ruse. It's all a farce. Yale's just trying to cover themselves. And this is all smoke and mirrors. And this is all a cover-up. And because now Yale is because I refuse to let this go. And I want Yale held accountable for this, for terrorizing me. I believe that this is part of Yale's many years campaign of terror and harassment against me. And I want Yale held accountable for this. But moreover, still, right now, let's just assume that this wasn't a fake death threat from Yale. Let's just assume that that's the case. Still, according to Yale, this is a credible death threat, and whoever sent it is completely unaccounted for. And Yale didn't tell the Yale community, didn't tell the general public, even after the mass shooting at Brown University. And Dwayne Lavello was interviewed by a Yale Daily News reporter, and he said currently, in this current semester, spring semester at Yale, 2026, that they are continuing their heightened security measures, but that there is no credible death threat, that there's no credible threat to the Yale community at this time. So he lied to the Yale Daily News reporter. And now I have asked the Yale Daily News to report on this. I've been asking everyone to report on this. I can't get anyone to report on this. And so I'm just sort of at a loss now what to do. And so my very dear beloved friend Wilfred Riley is going to do a podcast with me about this. But this is a serious issue. This is a serious issue. Either the death threat was a fake death threat and Yale needs to be held accountable for terrorizing me, or it was a real death threat and Yale is refused to act on it until I reached out to the Department of Education at the end of December. And I believe Yale was prompted to finally act on it after 2 months, even after the mass shooting at Brown, because I reached out to the Department of Education. And even now, Yale is hiding this from the Yale community, from Yale students, which is the grossest Clery Act violation. And Yale is lying about this, obscuring this, dissembling about this. And this is part and parcel of Yale's egregious anti-white racism, and why Yale, it is not safe for the Yale community, it is not safe for students. And God forbid that there's a shooting now. God forbid that there's a shooting now at Yale. God forbid that whoever sent this death threat, if it wasn't a fake death threat from Yale, God forbid that that person now, that there's a shooting at Yale and no one knows what's going on. The Yale students don't know what's going on. The Yale profs don't know what's going on. The Yale professors, the entire Yale community, the general public doesn't know what's going on. So I'll stop there. I love you all so much. Have a great night.